So now we've got roughly about 20 minutes to go through a question and answer session with Agneta and Chris. So I've got some questions to ask, but I'd like to know who in the audience has some questions. And we've got 2 roving microphones, one on either side. So if you could just give me a show of hands, who's got a question? I can see there's someone there in the middle, 4 rows in. And just pass the microphone. Is there anybody on this side? You know, come on, let's get a bit of competition going. If we've got a question over here, we've got to have a question over here. Is there anybody? Can I see anybody? No, okay, that's fine. So again, the rules of the game for the whole day around questions is please state your name, your organisation, and then be as brief as you can with your question. If you're going to give a lecture, a political statement or whatever, I will just close you down. But if you're going to ask a really nice, clever question, that'd be fantastic. So we'll go to you in a moment. What I'm just curious to know is, you know, Chris, looking at the UK perspective, what we did those years ago, looking where Sweden is now, getting the mobilisation, the action plans together, is there anything that you would do differently today if you were starting again? In other words, what would be your top tips or advice for the Swedish construction sector and the Swedish politicians in driving this agenda?
How long have we got? I mean, that is a very, very powerful but also all-embracing question. So I'll just try and give some flavour.
Yeah, just top tips, yeah.
So I think that be bold in terms of the target setting is absolutely paramount. But there's no point being bold if you can't measure the starting point. So understanding what the baseline is against which reduction is happening. So you know maybe when you've reached carbon neutrality, but you need some steps en route. So being able to measure success en route. I think collaboration, and particularly the procurement model that's being talked about, that would encourage collaboration and encourage longer term thinking rather than short termism, is really, really important.
So just on those points, bringing in Agneta, thinking about the measurement side of things, have you got that in place, or is that still a work in progress in terms of understanding where you can find your carbon savings?
It differs quite a lot between different companies and organizations. We have calculated Skanska Sweden's baseline in quite a good way, so we're comfortable with the figures, but many companies have not yet.
And is there guidance and support for them to be able to do those calculations, which are going to be important?
Yeah, I think they have to. It's not about calculating carbon. It's about really getting control and information about your business and your suppliers. What do you supply? What do you buy? What kind of materials? So you have to have the systems in place, the procurement systems in place, and then you can do the carbon calculations relatively easy. So it's about getting all the systems.
Okay, so then just thinking about that procurement piece, from your knowledge in the current Swedish market, what are the questions that need to be asked to be able to get that information to flow through that value chain? Are they being asked? And if not, when will they be asked?
They are not asked still. I mean, a few companies ask their suppliers. And the suppliers, I think, can deliver answers, but it has not been top of the mind, still, but it will be, I think.
Because it's in those action plans,
yeah.
It's in your roadmap. So Chris, from the UK perspective, using intelligent clients to drive procurement models that reduce cost in your case, but also take the carbon out, how do you go about doing that in a way that gives the right signal to the market for them to respond? And how long does that take?
There has to be a will to do this, and I think it's one of the hardest things for the public sector to do, and to do well, because the public sector gets its strength, its support from a tendering process. It uses a tendering process to demonstrate value. This is where being able to baseline cost and demonstrate value in other ways has to come through. Because whilst ever you're in a tendering process, then you're probably going for least cost capital solution, and you're probably creating a team which may be a winning team to do a one-off project and then be disbanded and moved on. A program of work, and I think Bridges was mentioned at some point either last night or this morning, is an ideal process for actually having a longer term procurement, getting better, getting smarter over time, using innovation and investing in innovation at the outset in order to be able to overcome some of the challenges. So changing that procurement paradigm becomes really, really important, and moving to one that is longer term, collaborative, and has a different way of measuring value and demonstrating value is probably at the heart of it.
And do we need to build capacity in our financial accountants and experts to understand the value for money equation? Do we need to build capacity in our procurement divisions, whether it's in the public or the private sector? Do we, or do we have that in place, both for Sweden and for the UK, for that matter? I mean, Agneta, in terms of your roadmap, the building the intelligence system that's going to drive the market in the right direction, getting that intelligence. Do we have the capabilities within Sweden for procurement to do that?
Yeah, I think so.
You have, yeah? And so that means you have models that will drive value for money and include the equations around social and environmental benefits and not drive the lowest price.
That would be a challenge still, to just not look at cost, just look at the value created and the life cycle cost.
So you're in a challenging situation?
Yeah.
Okay. Chris from the UK, what would you say to that? Anglia Water, have you cracked it? Where else do you see good practice where we can share and learn?
So have we cracked it? No, because we're insatiable, aren't we, in terms of raising the bar and raising the challenge. So there'll always be a challenge to become more efficient and at the same time deliver things like service to customers, product to customers quicker, faster, cheaper, with less carbon, more sustainable. That will always be there as far as I can see into the future. I think as a country, there's a lot of recognition now going into the fact that we need to move to a more relationship-based form of contracting rather than transactional form of contracting. And Anglian Water is at the heart of that thinking with the Institution of Civil Engineers and Her Majesty's Treasury to try and land that. It's called Project 13, if anybody wants to take a look at that.
Yeah, no, that's really, that's a good point. Yeah, Project 13 is I think if you Google that, there's a website and there's some really good information there. Now, I'm keen to bring in the audience, and there was someone fourth row back who had a question. And so please, over to you.
Thanks. Ida Karlsson from Chalmers Technical University, also involved in Mr. Carbon Exit, for those who know that project. I have a question about concrete. I was very inspired by your cement-free concrete. In Sweden, we have been very conservative about using any alternative binders in concrete. And my question to you is, how do you get past the maybe perceived actual risk of the longevity of the concrete and any other perceived risk in terms of the planning and actual implementation?
And I think I gave the hint there that this is where there has to be greater work, wider collaboration, etc. Because we've used it. We're the first water company to use it, but we've used it as general concrete. So we've used it in roads, our own roads. We've used it as backfill. We've used it in non-structural scenarios. The supply chain would really, really struggle to use it in a structural sense at the moment because the Euro codes don't cover it. But one of my challenges to our supply chain is, do you want to be a giant or do you want to be the tallest dwarf? The tallest dwarf being the one working within the existing codes, or the giant being the one that's actually embracing, collaborating and understanding the way forward on this one. But it is something that I think is so clearly the right way forward. If we can't wean ourselves off using concrete, using SEM-free and low-carbon concrete is an obvious thing, but we need to invest in what that means from a perspective. Otherwise, professional indemnity insurance and all the sort of things that get in the way will continue to get in the way, and I don't sit comfortably with accepting no as an answer or accepting barriers.
Yeah, and if we look at that analysis, which you've done and others, we know concrete, steel, and some of these other carbon intensive, we need the innovations, but we also need the governance and the structures to provide confidence. So the standards that we have, is it going to be performance-based or just merely compliance? So I'm sure we're going to be discussing that later on in the conference. So can I just have another show of hands? Who else has got some burning questions for what we've got out here? You're still waking up from your morning coffee, are you? Okay, you're not going to get off lightly for the next session. So my next question then is, what's the significance of PAS 2080? So this is that systematic approach that you could follow for being able to effectively measure and manage infrastructure carbon. Do you see in Sweden, do you think that there's a possibility to, translate, adjust, but having that kind of understanding of process, would that be helpful? Is that missing, or do you have something in place, not a PAS 2080, but another way of getting everyone to understand how to do it?
I think it could be helpful. We are used to working in different management systems and environmental certification systems, so it might really bring a structure for the work. And we haven't used it in Sweden. So
well, it's very new, isn't it? So, Chris, you've gone through it. There are other contractors, material suppliers are now going through that. Big infrastructure projects through their procurement strategies are asking their value chain, their suppliers, to have this PAS 2080. In a nutshell, or a summary, why? Why did you do it? Where's the value in it? And can you see an application in other markets?
Why did we do it as Anglian Water, or why did we do
why
it
did
as
the
UK?
Industry in the UK need it?
Okay.
And what's the benefit then
So
for you?
I think the clue was in the infrastructure carbon review, which companies were happy, if not eager, to sign up to, and you saw the household names up there on the screen. But of course, as soon as leaders in those businesses signed up to it, the practitioners go, well, what does that mean? So you've signed up to this, but how do I go on this journey? What are the things that we need to put in place? How will I know what I don't know? And I think that was the driver for PAS 2080. And as you say, it's quite a high bar. So if you're not doing it at the moment, then it takes a period of time to embody, pardon the pun, those processes into a business in order to be able to demonstrate accreditation, which is the reason why only a handful since its launch in 2 years ago have got that accreditation. The more that are now demanding it, so HS2, High Speed 2, the new rail line from London to Birmingham, the government has decreed that the suppliers will have PAS 2080 accreditation within 12 months on that. So there's a groundswell. But PAS 2080 is something that has come out of the UK, it's come out of the British Standards Institute. When you talked about America, we're here in Sweden today, the Chinese are interested, and it just takes a critical mass to say, actually, is this something that could become an ISO standard and take some of that mystery away, so there's consistency in terms of what we're looking at. And that, together with the science-based targets that we mentioned earlier, may well be a way forward. And I'll be interested in feedback from the conference today, whether others see that as a way forward.
Exactly, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Agneta and Chris. We have run out of time. I'm going to not ask the question, but I'm going to put it out in the room, because in the next session when we come back, we've got the client group. And Agneta, in your presentation, talked about influencing the clients to procure more intelligently. So my big challenge to us all is how. Okay, so the clients are going to come back, and you're going to get an international perspective again. Bear that in mind, because I want that part of the room to ask that question. Were you going to do that for me, yeah? Because I think we need to start to think, we now know what the problem is. We've had some inspiration around it is achievable, yeah, so that's fantastic. So how do we start to translate some of this into meaningful action that's going to make a difference? So to me, it's not the why anymore, it's not the what, it's the how. And collectively, we should be able to answer that question together today. So can I ask you to say thank you very much to Agneta and Chris for 2 fantastic speeches. Thank you. Please sit down.
Well done, Andy.
Thank you.